Hey guys, this is International Master of Givon here. Welcome back. So in this video and also in part 2 of the same theme or topic, I'm going to be discussing the topic of declining sacrifices by the opponent, or sometimes even sacrificing material ourselves in order to actually defuse enemy's initiative. So in many games that we would be seeing in the new course by me for the Remote Chess Academy, we're going to be seeing games where one side sacrifices material for some attack, some initiative, some lead in development. But I've came to realize that it's always easier to sacrifice material to be on the attacking side, on the initiating side. But there is also another type of sacrifices, which is the more defensive type of sacrifices. For example, one side realizes that he's under strong pressure, that he's under strong attack. So what he must do, give back some material in order to kind of relieve himself for the enemy's pressure. This is a very kind of advanced theme. Very rarely I would see in beginners games such strategies. Usually beginner's mistake is to very kind of firmly try to defend all material at all times. Very rarely an intermediate player would kind of give up material if he doesn't feel obliged to. So let's see a couple of examples of what exactly I'm talking about. So I was searching in some games of mine examples of this theme, and I came across a couple of games. So in this position that you see in front of you, I was playing with the white pieces against a strong Czech international master, and I was having the white pieces. And I saw an opportunity in this position to basically win a pawn, to play the move queen e5 check if I want. I'm saying winning a pawn because black is definitely not going to play a passive move like knight e7 to defend this pawn, because now his development is really stuck and he cannot castle. That would be a very bad decision. He can also not really play bishop e7, because then also perhaps the pawn on g7 is hanging. So I was thinking that should be a pretty safe pawn to take, but I really kind of regretted this decision later on, as you shall see. So in this position, if white just plays simple moves, for example, he's playing d3, just getting ready to develop the knight and the bishop to some squares. White enjoys a small advantage, many thanks to the fact that this pawn on d4 is a little bit weak. One idea is to play knight d2, knight f3 to put a little bit of pressure there. Also the white knight can come from f3 to g5 to put some pressure on the black king. White is enjoying himself here. But as it happens to many of us, it's very difficult to resist the urge to gain material. If you see an opportunity to create a tactic that wins a pawn, you don't see, let's say, an immediate reason why this is not good for you. Most players would do it. So I played queen e5 check. Kind of later on I regretted it. I should have just continued my development, because I didn't realize enough that I do pay a price. First of all, I moved my queen already for the third time, neglecting opening principles. He played bishop e6, developing move, queen takes d4, and really the move that probably surprised me in advance was the fact that I assumed that because this pawn on g7 is under pressure, he wouldn't be able to develop his bishop, but I couldn't be more wrong. He almost immediately played bishop d6, and only now I realized that things are not as simple as I thought them to be. Because if now white is greedy, and also takes the second pawn. This is, by the way, a good principle that I want you guys to remember, especially when we talk about the opening. If your opponent is gambiting a pawn in the opening, usually, in most cases, it's okay to take the first pawn, but it's already dubious or dangerous to take the second pawn. So one principle to keep in mind is be careful when taking more than one pawn in the opening. Usually it might lead to troubles. In this position, by the way, I'm challenging the viewers to find a pretty beautiful combination that black already has in this position. You know, from first glance it might look like black is just losing at this position. He's 2 pawns down. His rook is under attack, he cannot castle, it looks like everything went wrong for him, but in reality it is white who is probably losing because he has almost no development of pieces on the queen side. So this gives black actually the legitimacy to immediately go for the attack with the beautiful sacrifice. Bishop takes h2 check, king takes h2, queen h4 check, gaining one more tempo for the development of the black queen. And after king to g1, black castles long. This is a really remarkable position. At the moment, white is having a huge material advantage, a piece and a pawn up, but he has a lot of problems. The very immediate one is that his bishop is under attack, but in the more long run, because the g file is already opened up against the white king, these type of moves combined with black superior development will lead to a very quick victory for black. An exemplary variation could be if bishop takes knight on d5, the bishop takes back. Now also the bishop is aiming at g2. And once again, if the queen tries to escape somewhere, that doesn't really help. Black can play rook g8. And well, in this position, white is so much behind in development that even though he is officially up a piece, in reality he's down maybe 3 pieces because nobody of these pieces can do anything to assist the white king. White is losing. So definitely white should not be greedy to take the second pawn. Remember the principle I was telling you. So in this position I realized that I cannot take the second pawn. I need to think about my development. So to simplify the position a little bit, I took on d5, which was a good decision, I think. Black castled. This is also a nice move. He is basically using the fact that my queen d4 is undefended. So white can, for example, if white takes another piece, there is bishop takes h2, king takes h2, queen takes d4. And I want to actually make a special mention for the position that you're seeing in front of you. At the moment, the material balance on the board is very unique. White has 3 pieces for black's queen, so officially there is material equality approximately on the board, but the position is much more complicated than this, because first of all the white bishop is hanging, he needs to move somewhere. So in this position, if the white pieces would be already out in the game, for example the knight would already be on c3, the bishop would already be on e3, the white king will be safe, I would say that white is much better, because usually 3 pieces outpower the queen in such positions in the long run. But once again, white's problem is with his development, so black can immediately take advantage of that. One exemplary variation is rook e8, knight c3, queen h4 check, king g1, everything is forced. And now black, for example, can play rook e5, creating ideas to create this battery of checkmate on the h-file. And white basically needs to find some very precise moves in order to survive already. Even though objectively the position is approximately equal, apparently, according to the engine, I would be scared a little bit to play as white here, because it's always unpleasant to play in a scenario where you constantly need to find some only moves. It's much easier to attack, obviously. So in this position, once again, you need to realize, the chess player needs to realize that he's about to be in troubles. He needs to think about his development. He needs to neglect any other considerations of material, basically anything else. Only think about development. So I played knight to c3. Black had to recapture my piece, and I played pawn to d3. At the moment, white is still a pawn up, but black still has a very good compensation. He has two good bishops. My queen on d4 is a little bit misplaced in the middle of the board. I would have to move it again probably. And I want you to take a look at his next move. He played it almost instantly. Rook to c8. Once again, you see a chess player that really has a good grasp of initiative and material. He understands that it's more important for him to get a new piece into the game, putting pressure on my c-file, creating ideas to attack my queen, but bishop to c5. And he doesn't even care about the fact that he hangs yet another pawn, because if you remember, by our principles, it's always dubious to take the second pawn that the opponent sacrifices, because what might happen if white takes this pawn on a7, which at the beginning looks like a free pawn, basically the problem is that now the white queen is being transferred way too far from the king side and from where the action takes place. Now black can develop a very strong attack. There are a couple of options to do so. One of them is being the very straightforward queen h4. This move is now possible since there is no white queen defending the square. Pawn to g3 is forced. And now, for example, black can play queen f6, creating ideas to penetrate with the queen and the bishop on the light square and create already very serious threats of checkmate. That would be a bad idea. So once again, instead of taking the second pawn, I was only thinking about finishing my development. I played bishop to f4. Obviously exchanging pieces is in white's favor. So he played bishop to c5, trying to preserve some pieces on the board. Queen e5 is almost forced. Rook e8. Rook e1, developing my almost kind of last piece into the game. And now I'm giving my opponent an opportunity after d4, knight e4. If he wishes, he can regain his pawn. But this is our theme in this video. Sometimes in order to stabilize your position and to make it safe from the opponent's attack or initiative, it makes a lot of sense to give back some material in order to get some time back, because now the material is equal on the board, but at least all of white's pieces managed to be developed into the game. And from this point onwards, the game became really unclear. The position is about equal at the moment. I lost the game later on from some other reasons. You could find the full game in the description. Basically, we've seen a couple of things in this game. We saw that black, from the very beginning of the game, constantly, very confidently offering white some free pawns that he can take in order to kind of accelerate his development and play for quick initiative. White's best strategy would have been to just decline even the first pawn from the beginning and just focus on his development. And as we've seen later on, a very good idea would have been to also give the pawn back at the right moment in order to kind of relieve some of the pressure and get developed. Let us take a look at a second example, slightly even a more complicated one, I would say. In this game I was playing with the black pieces, and my opponent here just played a pretty dubious move, I would say, as white. He played the move pawn to h3, which is a very, very slow move in the opening. You know, instead of developing pieces, trying to get closer to castling, he played this very, very slow looking move. So I really want to take advantage of such a slow move. I immediately played the move knight to e5, offering him a free pawn on b7, a pawn which in retrospect I think he should have perhaps declined taking. He should have been trying to search for a way to develop the remainder of his pieces. You can see that his knight is still stuck in the corner, since if he plays knight e2, black inflicts huge damage to his pawn structure, which is not acceptable for him. So he decided to take the pawn, but this pawn comes with a price. He is now forced to lose a lot of time. Rook to b8, gaining a tempo on his bishop, developing a new piece into the game. The bishop has to retreat back to where it was. Now I played queen to a5. You see now black's pressure is starting to mount. There is the pin against this knight on c3. There are some threats also for some discovered attacks with this bishop on g7, which is lurking from behind. So white was forced to play the move queen to d2 to unpin himself. And in this position, what do you guys think? What should black play in this position? Remember, he is up in development. Almost all of his pieces are now in the game, but he's having a pawn down, so he must kind of act quickly and try to open up the position. What should he play? So the very thematic move in this position now comes pawn to d5, trying to open up the game. Now in this position, white should be very, very careful in order not to get himself into trouble. My opponent in this game made the classical mistake of trying to kind of hold on to the material, which later on caused him to lose the game. I want to try the viewers to look at this position and see if they can find a defensive idea for white where he can give up some material back in order to stabilize his position, maybe exchange some pieces, and make sure that black could not attack further away. It's not an easy task. You can take your time to think about it, stop the video if you need. So white made the wrong move. He played pawn to c5, trying to maintain all of his pawns. Very soon we will see why this move was so wrong. So a very nice resource that existed here was the move knight takes d5. At first glance it looks like it's losing material because of the move knight d3 check, but this was actually white's best chance. White can now play king to f1. The black queen is now under attack, so if black wants to actually take the white rook, he should first exchange queens. Now white has this clever intermediate check on e7, which avoids black from capturing the knight. King h8, bishop takes queen, knight takes rook on c1, bishop takes c1. This is the position that white should have aimed for. At the moment, white is in exchange down for 2 pawns, so the material is about equal. White is still having some issues with his kingside development, but the reason that this position is much safer for him to play is because white is extremely stable here. First of all, there are no obvious weaknesses. You can see that those pawns very well defend each other. All of white's pieces are defended. This knight looks to be in danger, but very soon he will escape from c6 and the bishop is defending it very well. Another reason why this position is much safer, because white managed to exchange queens, and automatically without the queens on the board it's much more difficult for the attacking side to create a significant attack. So in this position, white would be safe. But as we mentioned, white kind of made a decision that many players would make. He played c5. Please pay attention that the move pawn takes d5 would be completely wrong, because it would only help black to open up the center. So for example, black can now play rook f d8, continuing to mount some more pressure against white's position. You can see that all of black's pieces are now developed. They are fully kind of battle ready. White is actually nearly lost in this position. He played c5. His idea was to try to close up the position before the black pieces can enter the attack. But our thematic idea here to continue sacrificing material, pawn to d4 happened. A very kind of, I would say, a move that is begging to be played, because black wants to further open up the position. Bishop takes d4. I played the rook b to d8. It was also possible to play rook f to d8. Probably I wanted to keep the rook on f8 available for the e file. And after queen e3, trying to unpin himself, already the tactics are working for black. There's probably more than one way to win from this position. The most clean way is knight f to g4, attacking the white queen. H takes g4, rook takes d4, using the fact that now the queen cannot really take on d4 because of the discovered attack. And white actually resigned pretty soon. So you see, in this game, white's opening was a little bit dubious, a little bit uncautious. But if he would be attentive enough and would sacrifice some material back, not being greedy, he could have still stabilized his position and keep a normal game. So remember, guys, never be too hard on the idea of keeping all of your material. When needed, it's a good idea to give some material back to safeguard our position and kind of continue the game with no damage. Hope you enjoyed this video lesson. We will continue discussing some more of these examples in the next video. Bye bye.